Welcome to Women in Sport Africa, a show that shines the spotlight on, celebrates phenomenal women in sport. We're taking it from the grassroots to the pitch, and of course we'll go into the boardroom as well. We're celebrating game changers, history makers, women that step into the room and they vibrate with positivity, influence, as well as all things great. We'll also touch in on those fun things that we love as girls. But of course, if you are watching at home, I promise I can confirm that by the time you're done watching this show, you would have been wiser. And that's why we call ourselves Women in Sport Africa. Our first guest is no stranger to leadership transformation. She's an innovator, a legacy builder, if I may call it that. So she is a powerhouse executive, just so that we get a rounded view of who she is, and the CEO of one of South Africa's most iconic clubs. She holds a business science degree from UCT and an MBA, an international one at that, from a university in Spain. Sinenjabulo Zungu-Ntuli, thank you so much for joining us on our first episode. Like the way serious ngakhona sithe siqala ngo-CEO. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks, and you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Sne, let's go back to, because awukhulela boardroom. Back in Durban, growing up, how was it like? We know your father, Osandile Zungu, was he strict? Just take us through your childhood and things that stand out for you.
Okay, so ngikhulele eMlazi. I was born and raised in Umlazi, Wapi. I'm actually ingane yagogo.
Okay.
So I was raised by my paternal grandmother predominantly. I was raised in a household full of women. Mainly actually my grandmother and my great-grandmother. Gakula in between my paternal family and my maternal family in Umlazi. So I would walk from my father's home to my mother's home every weekend, almost. My father, was he strict? Yes, probably, yeah. Make 2 years was over, gosh, I used to run away because he was strict.
Yes.
But I think as in Kula, I realized he's actually not that strict. He's just a disciplinarian, but quiet disciplinarian. Like he doesn't shout, but he gives you that look and you're like, you know.
Yeah, we know the look. If you grew up in a black household, you know that it's time to stop. But as you said, you grew up in a household full of women, and obviously your father very influential. So when you're going to school, what kind of student is Usne? Are you the one mover, or were you like the A student, academic girl?
So it's actually very weird. In primary school, I've always been, I'd say, an average student academically. I did go through periods, obviously I was an A student in some subjects and got colors here and there. But generally I was an average student. But in primary school, I was very good at maths. And I remember I was good at maths, but I was also a very outspoken child. So I used to get into trouble quite a bit in primary school. To a point where, because I lived with my grandmother, the principal called my mom in to say, listen, your child is a bit problematic. She's like a little Winnie Madigizela Mandela here, but you don't understand because she's performing so well at school.
Yes.
So I think for like a couple of months or a year, I had to then go live with my mom because they needed to kind of rear me in. But I then left that school and I went to St. Mary's.
Yes.
And I think my behavior changed there. More disciplined, quite focused on academics, quite focused on extramural activities. So there was a bit of a shift, but generally an average performing student, but good at leadership and everything else.
Yeah. And we know growing up in a black household, especially in Okoko, and you had too, the lessons are always there every day. What are some of the lessons that you remember from your grandmother that shaped you today and the woman that you are?
Sure. My grandmother honestly is or was a formidable woman, very strong in character. She really was typically a matriarch. A lot of her relative kids actually used to come and live with us. So she literally raised her entire family. So some of the lessons are awuphili wedwa. Funda ukuphila nabantu, funda ukuphilisana nabantu. It's important to respect people and take people for who they are. Don't try and change people. Yes. And also extend your hand where you can.
And I suppose some of the lessons, Sne, like you saying that you were a talkative student, very opinionated, and sometimes that will obviously rattle teachers. But those are the early signs of a leader.
I agree. But at the time, it's not seen as that. And it's funny also because when I left that primary school, they made examples of me when I had left, but they thought I was troublesome. But when I had left, all of a sudden, Sne is this girl who's doing well. I'm like, weird.
Serious. And then looking at sport, were you involved in any sport? Was there a love? Yeah.
I was very sporty from primary school. I was a good swimmer. I played netball. I played football, and then in high school I played football, I played badminton, I played netball, so I was quite a sporty kid.
Did you have any ambitions that one day maybe the green and gold of South Africa, I'll be there?
Not really.
Yeah.
No, not really.
Not really. No. Okay. And as you're saying, the relationship between your grandmother, your two grandmothers, your great grandmother and your grandmother, and your daddy that would come over every now and then. Now, how do you then balance the influence between a grandmother who's a matriarch and a father?
If I'm being honest, initially there was no balance. I think I started recognizing my father's influence saying to khula kancane. It wasn't at my initial stages or my upbringing. It was when I was a bit more aware of who my father is, his influence, and I suppose what he brings as a father. But because I was surrounded by women, a lot of influence came from the women.
At any points, do you feel pressure because of now you're growing older, you're aware, this is my dad and this is the stature he holds? Do you feel pressure to then uphold that as well and be that girl who is the daughter of?
I did for a while. But then again, I don't know if it's a realization or if it's growing up or just coming into my own. I was like, I'm not my dad. I'm not Sandy Zungu. I'll never be.
Yes.
He's also not a Sinenjabulo, and he'll never be. So that can't be pressure on me. However, I think it pushes one to try and do good, because if you don't, then fuzeba. So it pushed me to be a better person, to just strive to do good.
Yeah.
But I don't think at this stage there's that much pressure to be an overachiever now.
Okay. You are watching The Woman in Sport Africa, the first edition, and our guest is Sinenjabulo Ntuli Zungu, and she is the CEO of AmaZulu. And I'm green and white, but guess is when we come back, we're going deeper to her education and her ambitions as a young girl who grew up in the KZN. Back to The Woman in Sport Africa, a show that profiles, honors and celebrates women in sport, trailblazers, game changers, those kind of names, those kind of words, those kind of descriptions. That's what we're about. And our guest is Sinenjabulo Zungu-Ntuli. And we spoke about her childhood and where she grew up with Qhubeka and her dad as well. Looking at your CV, Sine, Masingena, you know those apps that will show us the credentials, marketing and business seems to be the two words that will pop up a lot. But also, you're a starter, it seems. You like to start things. And where would you say that comes from?
That definitely comes from my father. I think that is definitely his influence. Trying and just, look, I think even Yena in business, there's certain businesses that he has done that weren't successful. And that taught me, Uguti, you won't always be successful in everything that you do, but just keep trying. So that definitely comes from him.
One that shocked me was forensics. Now, as a black girl, when I see forensics, I just think one thing. But let's talk about forensics and I suppose maybe the diversity of what you've done. It's not just sports. It's not just marketing.
My career has been a fruit salad, honestly. But the common thing is marketing, because in every industry I've entered as a marketing something. Yeah. Even in forensics, I went into it as a marketing manager. I then got promoted to CEO, I think probably a year and a bit later. But I started off as marketing there. Yeah.
And as a student at UCT, did you have a clear path of where you see yourself and where you're going? No. That hardly happens at university, actually.
No, I'd honestly be lying.
Yeah.
I've actually told the story. Initially, I wanted to do drama. I wanted to be Sarafina on the stage. But that never happened because my parents were like, over my dead body.
Yeah.
And then I applied to do aeronautical engineering at WITS. I got accepted for that. I applied to do business science at UCT. The reason I applied to do business science at UCT is because a lot of the kids from my school were going to UCT.
Okay.
So it was going to be a familiar environment.
Yes.
Business science, it sounded good. Business, it's commerce. I didn't know what it was really about. But I just knew that at least it's something that I'm familiar to. So I did that. Started off in finance. I think in third year, must have been third year, I changed to marketing because I didn't like the idea of being in an office and you're busy on your laptop or computer the whole day. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I like being with people. I like being around people. I also think I'm a creative somewhat. So I changed to marketing and I actually really enjoyed it. And I've never looked back since.
Your MBA coming from Spain. So did you actually take it in Spain or was it one of those?
Actually left.
Okay.
So I was always going to further my studies at some point. It was a bit delayed. I was supposed to do it earlier, but nonetheless, in 2019, I applied to do it in Spain and I got accepted and off I went. And I was stuck there during COVID. When COVID started actually, Spain and I couldn't come back. But I suppose that assisted because it helped with me completing my MBA and coming back saying I did. Yeah.
And now you're coming back from Spain, you're coming back. Had you already started your career or you were still going to get into the workforce?
No. I had started. I was actually CEO of Qhubeka Forensic Services.
Okay.
At the time, I had been CEO, I think, for about 2 years. And then I took a sabbatical. Came back to that position. So that was in August. Only for us to buy AmaZulu Football Club.
Yes.
And that's how I transitioned to AmaZulu.
So before we get to AmaZulu, because that's another very big story, I just want to talk to you about the importance of education, especially in a South Africa where these days you think, is it worth going to university? Am I going to sit with an honors degree at home? Should I even bother to waste imalengeko, to be honest, and go and pursue an education that I have no guarantees will actually get me anyway?
I think it's such a big topic in the education, and it's such a pity that you find a lot of graduates sitting at home with no jobs. But the truth of the matter is education is really important. Outside of getting the qualification, I think it just opens you up to a lot of opportunity. It opens you up to a lot of exposure to different things, and just the way of thinking changes. My mom often says, especially when she's referring to people that aren't thinking right at a particular time.
Yes.
But she's correct. Education is extremely important. It's also true that it doesn't really necessarily guarantee you a certain future, but you could argue the same between a private school and a public school. But yeah, ibalulekile.
Would you then say for women specifically, and a woman who's entering the space, as you're saying, you're the CEO of Qhubeka, how is then the treatment when you come in as Sinenjabulo, the CEO?
Treatment where?
in terms of the workspace? Because we know there's always those dynamics of there's a new CEO or kuzofika CEO and it so happens she walks in heels.
No, actually, I did have a bit of trouble there. I think I had more trouble there than I did at AmaZulu, funny enough. At the time, I was also quite young. I was not from that industry, but I think I got that role because of my leadership. So it was a bit difficult, not necessarily in the industry, but in the people that I found there. And it was predominantly males. So there was actually quite a struggle. But siyawina, we conquer. So it was fine. After some time. It took some time.
Yeah.
We ended up being decent friends, to be honest.
Okay.
But it did take a while.
And that's what women have to go through to this day. You get into a space as a woman and you have to prove yourself. You have to work harder. You have to sometimes even compromise yourself as a person in order to be respected. And that's what Wiser is about. It's us being wiser through Istori Saga Sinenjabulo. When we come back, we are officially going to get into it. Usutu, and how the Zungu family steps into the PSL running one of the country's most iconic clubs. Welcome back to Women in Sport Africa with myself, Lona Bumiso, and delighted and honored to be joined by Sinenjabulo. Sne comes October 2020, and Ubabu Sandile Uti, Nyotengi Club. Number one, was it expected? Is it something that he's always said it's one of his dreams, or it just came as a shock to the family?
It wasn't expected necessarily, but I do remember we were on holiday probably a couple of years before that. And I said it in jest also because businessmen buy football clubs. Yes. I was like, we should buy a football club. But I was just joking, and I don't even think anybody noticed or took me seriously. But when he did buy the club, it really wasn't expected. Even my involvement, there was no plans of me actually going to AmaZulu. I joined AmaZulu initially to help with the marketing. If you remember, at the beginning of our tenure as the Zungu family, there was a lot of hype, a lot of marketing activity going on. I only became CEO a year later. Yeah.
And now, a year later, you started as a consultant in the marketing department. A year later, that movement from that to CEO, and you touched on it briefly, that it wasn't the easiest space to get into in terms of, and we know in South Africa, you look at the female owners, club owners, it's Mamato Madlala, and now we have Uswongile, who's come in the NFD. So here is, and also too, is chasing 100 years from KZN, a very patriarchal province when you look at our country. How are you then received as the next CEO of the club?
Before I answer that, by the way, when I was consulting as marketing, whatever, I was actually still at Qhubeka Forensics as CEO. So I was juggling between the two.
Both jobs.
Yeah. How was I received? I think it was mixed emotions or mixed reactions. There were certain nuances, but the general feel was, great, transformation, a little bit of change. But I think you must understand that I was entering into a space that is 90% men. So NAMI, it means that I need to switch on, pay attention to certain things, not necessarily behave in a certain manner, because I was quite familiar to spaces that are predominantly male, but it's different from corporate. It's different from a normal industry, and I say normal because I don't think football is normal.
Trust me.
I don't think it's normal, but it's fun.
Yeah.
So the reception was mixed, man. I think from the AmaZulu side, especially the supporters, a lot of them liked the idea of being led by a young person with fresh ideas. But nakhona, there's a certain portion of them that are quite traditional, quite old, who don't necessarily understand the change.
Yes.
So you have to approach them in a certain manner for them to understand and take them with and show them ukuthi we're not changing because we are trying to make AmaZulu something else in a bad way, but we are trying to elevate the club. So you kind of need to, for lack of a better word, educate them every now and then.
Yeah.
But generally, it was okay. It was okay.
And then what would you say are perhaps some of the challenges of entering this space? Because as a journalist myself, I will go to press conferences and I'm lucky if there's 3 females, you know. I missed one the other day. I was like, yo, I just don't want to be part of that space. But then what would you say are some of the challenges just purely from being a female?
Yeah, it's difficult to answer that, but I think we know how males behave. Also, I haven't necessarily experienced that in person, but I've seen it. There's a level of undermining a female in the space because the perception or the assumption is that it's our space. Wazin when I get ball. So hence I say there's nuances. So you get that, but I haven't experienced it personally. But like I said also, ang banqena bafana, abantu besilisa in any space.
Yes.
So even if I see that come through, I try to find a way of working around it.
Yeah. There's also a perception, and sometimes it lives mostly on social media, where even women will say, once you get a female leader, things get tough. I've had female leaders where I'm like, yo, I would have thought that Usis Banbani would have been a lot better, you know. What is your perception of female leadership in the country?
Sure, okay. I think because only now we are getting proper leadership positions, whether knowingly or unknowingly, some of us will act tough to try and, for some reason, I think we think it gives you a certain stature. I genuinely don't think it's intentional for them to act otherwise. I think it's just a pressure that they probably put on themselves to behave that way. I don't think it's there's ill intentions. But Gona does seem to cause some issues between females, female to female, where they think it's tougher being led by a female. I can't answer it better than that, honestly. Yeah.
And just looking at AmaZulu, lastly, to wrap up that portion, 5 years in now, a great 6th place finish in the previous season, and the season continues now with a young coach, a younger squad. What is Sne as the CEO's vision? And you're approaching that 100-year mark, which is a big deal for the club. So
I'll start with the 100-year mark. That's very important to us. I think everything we're doing now is in preparation for 2032. Our journey is really about 2032, to say when we reach 100 years, we want to have accomplished certain things, we want to have achieved certain things, including trophies on that very empty cabinet. But we everything is literally working towards that in terms of just brand building as well, being a formidable brand, not just in South Africa, but Africa and globally. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that happens. This season, I'm actually quite excited.
Okay.
I'm quite excited. We've got a younger squad. Change is hard. But I think we're going about it the right way. I'm very excited. I think the game we played, although we didn't quite win, but I think it was a good game. I think it was an indication of where we're going. I'm hoping for the best for the season, and the coaches have our support, honestly. They really do.
And I think from watching from outside looking in, we've seen the changes, we've seen the innovation that has happened at AmaZulu. I remember one of the innovations, and we spoke about it briefly on radio, I don't know if you remember, was that basketball jersey that was launched by AmaZulu. But that's the whole rounded view of Sinenjabulo and her legacy that she's building, carving her own history, and not just at the back of her dad, Usandile Zungu. And we thank you so much. The episode is maybe done, but we continue because there's still more that we need to unpack with her in terms of victories and dreams and where she's going into the future. But that's where we wrap up Women in Sports Africa for the first episode, and I thoroughly hope that you enjoyed it, Ekaya. Next week we come back with part 2 with Sinenjabulo Zungu-Ntuli.